Is coming to you from the beautiful metaverse. And welcome to Midday with Rev Don. And as you recall from yesterday, we were going to talk today about the five mystic secrets. But first, I want to say hello to Hunter Joseph Bauta, who was born this morning, and welcome to the world, little boy. I hope that you have a lovely life. And I want to say hello to all the people who are joining us. I'm going to take just a moment to make sure that you are in fact joining us. Um, as I say most every day, I feel the need to check and be certain. And yes, there we are. We're broadcasting properly, and I'm very pleased for that. So the Five Mystic Secrets. The Five Mystic Secrets was the first major exposition of Corellian theology and philosophy in written form, written by my mother, Levada Lewis High Corel, under the pseudonym Elizabeth Greenwood in the 1980s. It's not the only thing my mother ever wrote, and I was saying in the chat room last night, the folders I was showing last week of old pagan magazines should have some other things my mother wrote in them, and perhaps we will also publish those at some point. But in this case, we're going to talk about the Five Mystic Secrets, which is the largest and best known thing that she wrote. And this coincides with the newest book from Corellian Publishing, which is in fact the Five Mystic Secrets multilingual edition. And we are bringing out, and you can find at Corellianpublishing.com on page 2 at present, the Five Mystic Secrets multilingual edition, and the languages are English, Spanish, Greek, French, Portuguese, Dutch, Swedish, and German. And this is available for pre-order with an expected arrival around June 1st. And Jason has kindly put up the URL, Corellianpublishing.com. Thank you, Jason, and hello. Hello to Renee, who I believe is probably watching. And hello to everyone in the chat room. And the Five Mystic Secrets, I figure what we're going to do is we're going to go through the Five Mystic Secrets and discuss them, but also the circumstances under which the book was written. And perhaps also why it was written under a pseudonym, although I think most pagans would understand that. I have always been out and pagan under my own name. Hello, Arlene, in the chat room. Since I was 13, in 7th grade, people knew that I was pagan. But my mother was not quite so quick to come out under her own name, and that was not uncommon in that day. It's not uncommon today for people to use a pseudonym of some sort. So when she decided to make a piece of writing to publish, she definitely wanted to use a pseudonym. Now, later, she backed off this somewhat, partly because she got mostly just positive reactions. But at the time, she definitely felt she needed a pseudonym, and most of the things she wrote were published as Elizabeth Greenwood. Greenwood was one of the alternate names of the family from one of the family homes. Redwood was the name of a different branch of the family. And Elizabeth was a name that, as a child, she had kind of fantasized about because my mother's name was Levita, or Leveda, depending how you wish to pronounce it. Her middle name was Nadine, and she often wished that my grandmother would have given her an ordinary name to hide behind. Because in school, being named Leveda Nadine ordained a certain path, for one better way to put it. And she always kind of wished that she had had a Betty somewhere in there to blend in a little bit more with the other girls. And so that was the name she chose for her nom de plume, her pseudonym. And that is what she wrote under, Elizabeth Greenwood. And at the time, we did a drawing of Elizabeth Greenwood, which was basically my mother as a slightly younger woman. And if you happen to have one of the early copies of the Five Mystic Secrets, that's the drawing you will see on the front. And it looked basically like my mother, but not necessarily at that moment. Later, when we reprinted it, we included a photo that showed her later in life. And she wrote this at the time of the rise of the so-called New Right, which of course has come into much greater flower in subsequent years, and turned out to be everything people feared that it might be. But that is what spurred her to write. That it was some of the ugly things that were being said and written at that time. In a lot of ways, the book was meant to be an answer to that. So if you read The Five Mystic Secrets, you'll notice that it is answering a certain social situation, which is um, unwanted proselytization, and um, it has a tone that often addresses this, and some very witty comments on the subject, such as that the universe is not a great um, supermarket war, um, with with people vying for with the divine powers vying for shoppers, and things like that, which make clear that this really had to do with the aggressive proselytization that was going on at that time. But the majority of the book is a statement of theology. So what I was going to do is go through those five secrets as they are described and talk about them, and kind of let you know what is here. And the first secret is knowledge. And the point of this is that you cannot have an informed opinion or make a decision if you don't have some knowledge about what you're looking at. That in spirituality, as in everything else, it is necessary to have a base to work from. And the more that you can learn, the more that you know, the more informed your opinion can be, the more informed your decisions can be. And that's why she began with knowledge. Um, the idea that all of your decisions, for example, could be made from one book was appalling in my mother's view, and brings us to Phaedra Bonowitz' famous saying, "Pagans don't have sacred books, we have sacred libraries." And that is basically the idea behind this, that it's not enough to know a thing, you must know all you can learn. The more you learn, well, for one thing, the more you'll know that there is to learn, and the less you may well understand, um, but your field of reference will expand, your ability to understand different points of view, and the depth of an idea will expand based on the more that you know. To follow, quote, a straight and narrow path, end quote, makes it very difficult to have understanding of anything because you don't have the references to understand them. Um, One of the things I often talk about um, in this broadcast and others is cinema. And we've been talking recently about Lord Don's Library of Horror, which will be returning to Pagan World TV soon. And the next movie is going to be Metropolis, which is a 1920s silent science fiction slash metaphysical film. And one of the things that's very important to understand before attempting to watch this is that it is, in fact, a 1920s silent film. And the acting style is very different from what we would see today. The pacing is different from what we might see today. And you have to understand this to be able to enjoy the film. It's easiest to understand this if you have, in fact, seen other silent films. And it's the same with metaphysics. To understand the point of view of a different school of metaphysics, it's easier if you've already studied several. To understand how people feel when they come from a different religion, if you have knowledge of several different religions, you're going to find it easier to understand. The same with philosophy and view of life, the same with culture. If you have knowledge of a wide range of cultures, you're going to be far more able to understand when you meet someone who comes from a different culture. And I want to say hello to Lavola in the chat room, and welcome. And so this is why knowledge is the first of the five secrets. And the second of the secrets, and in the book they're described as sisters. And one of the things that, well, I'm getting ahead of myself because the second secret is God. And um, one of the things my mother did in the book is she uses God as a gender neutral tool. She uses God, but speaks of she and her. And that's not necessarily how we would phrase it today, but that is how she phrased it when she wrote the book, partly for accessibility purposes. Today, I'd be more likely to say spirit or goddess, um, but the idea remains the same. And she definitely considered, as a Corellian, she thought of God as a feminine power, as the great mother, and also, of course, the great mother father, the great duality, which is talked about. But the chapter on God talks about the nature of God, the existential nature of deity, of spirit, whatever you want to call it, the above as opposed to the below, which of course are never separate, and how um, how if we understand that the world is millions of years old, billions of years old, if we understand the diversity of nature, the incredible diversity of nature, and the fact that so many things have come into the world and then gone back out of it. And if we look at God or deity or spirit in the sense of being an eternal being, then we must understand that deity has a different point of view than ours, a much broader point of view than ours. Um, that we cannot assume that deity is just a bigger version of ourselves. Deity is far more encompassing. And she talks, of course, in greater detail about this, but some of the points that she makes um, is that we access deity through our ideas of deity. And if you've studied the Corellian degree system, you'll be familiar with this idea expressed as the diamond. Um, she makes the point that the things that we do um, are really for ourselves. They do not ultimately affect deity. Um, that we're not a hockey puck for deity to play with. We are here to learn and grow. Let me read a paragraph um, on that subject. You are a piece of art in progress. God has spent good time starting you and isn't going to botch it now, just because you might take longer to complete than someone else. And she talks about how everyone takes longer or shorter times to develop spiritually. And this is only normal because we're all different. And this is not in any way a problem for deity. Deity is always there. Deity has, and she uses this phrase, all the time in the world. However long it takes us to learn the things we learn, however long it takes us to develop spiritually, deity is perfectly fine with that. Um, because deity, um, again, has all the time in the world. And um, this is an important thing to understand, particularly in light of certain other religions, which have often made it seem as though whether you belong to their particular church or their particular religion is a matter of cosmic importance. And my mother goes to great extent to say that this is not really the case. Deity is there whether you are paying attention or not. And hello to George in the chat room. It's good to see you. She makes the point that we see deity the way that we see deity, but that is not what deity is. We may see deity as an old man on a cloud, a stately woman with a cornucopia. Um, we may see deity as various admixtures of human and animal. We may see deity as completely abstract. But we can never know the totality of deity because deity is greater than we. We can only see as much as we can see and understand as best as we can. And hello, Janet from Ohio. And this is all part of that chapter on God. And she also makes the point the dinosaurs, if they understood deity, which she believed that they did, would have perceived deity in all likelihood as just a big dinosaur. But we don't see deity that way. But deity is still deity. Dinosaurs did not build temples that we know of, but they were there for millions of years. These are some of the arguments that she makes in the book. And so that is the second sister, which is God. The third sister, and third sister is life. And this chapter talks about the nature of life and the eternity of life, that this moment of incarnation is exactly that. Our souls are immortal, they go on. Life is not limited to one lifetime. And she goes farther to say that there is nothing you can do in this lifetime, so good or so bad, that it is a make it or break it moment for your soul. It can move you forward, it can push you back. But even the worst acts of the ordinary person are not something that has great cosmic significance. It has significance to the person, it has significance to their soul, but you know, the petty wrongs of an ordinary person, um, and she's referencing Judeo-Christian thought, that these do not hardly ever rise to something that would be worth destroying an immortal soul. And that even when we have done things that are not right, our soul must go forward to learn more and do better. And that is what happens. And that eventually our soul perfects itself, it gains much greater knowledge, it learns its true nature as an emanation of deity. And this can take as long as it needs to take. It can take 1,000,000 years. Deity doesn't care, because deity will still be there. If deity is eternal, and if our soul is eternal, there's no race. It takes as long as it takes. And that is the larger portion of the section on life, which is followed by the soul. And that speaks to some of the things I've already talked about: the nature of the soul, its immortal nature. That it talks to reincarnation and how we come into and out of incarnation. It speaks of what my mother refers to as the oversoul. Today we'd call that the higher self. Some of the terminology has changed in the many, many years since she wrote this. So if you're studying the degree lessons, oversoul is used in this document, refers to the higher self is used in those documents. But she speaks to how we must strive to be in sync with our higher selves, how we have a higher self, and that higher self is moving always toward the good as best it can. And again, it can take however long it needs. Hello to Jeannie in the chat room, welcome. And it's good to see everyone. And I'm going to take a look at, and basically this chapter is describing the relationship between the higher self and the lower self, and how important it is to have connection to your higher self. And that many people feel that they're lacking or missing something in life, never realizing that it's something that's inside, not outside, and that inside is the connection to the higher self. And in their incarnations, they pursue all of the external things. They pursue perhaps money, status, romance, but don't think to pursue their own spiritual self. And that in pursuing their spiritual self, in growing spiritually, in being in sync with their own higher nature, this is where true happiness comes from. It's not the external things. It will bring happiness to the external things, but it's very much an internal state. Happiness, as they say, is a state of mind. There are people, I believe that this is one of the points she makes, who are in terrible situations, objectively speaking, yet are happy, because happiness is internal. And there are people who are in wonderful situations, objectively speaking, who are terribly unhappy. I've often remarked that I've rarely known anyone with more problems or greater unhappiness um, than people with a great deal of money who have never faced a real problem because they blow many smaller things out of proportion. Um, and this is um, a manifestation of the fact that true happiness does not come from the external things. It comes from your internal spiritual growth. And then the final sister is freedom. And this is the fifth of the five sisters, and the all of these go into much greater detail than I'm going into because I have a half-hour broadcast. But the main point of the part of freedom is that you need not to be shackled in place, neither by yourself, which is usually what shackles people, nor the outside. Don't bind yourself. Set yourself free. Follow your heart. Follow your higher self. And this will give you the happiness you really want. Connect with your higher self and allow it to express itself in your life. And she goes on to talk about, for example, and I quote, "If you reach for something, you may not get it. But if you do not reach, then surely you will not get it. It's your choice. Every time, and a choice to be sure, to be made with good sense and intelligence, but still your choice. Use your own choices. Don't give that away to everyone else." Um, and she talks again about deity and that deity wants you to succeed. Deity wants you to be happy. Um, and that taking chances and making mistakes is the point of existence. Um, that making your own mistakes is the point of existing at all so that you can learn from them. So you're making your own successes in the long run. And she talks about the idea of a condemning angry God and why this really doesn't make sense, because why would deity create you with all of these abilities and then be upset that that you're using them? Um, she references the idea. Um, well, I'll simply read this chapter. God does not need you to build her sandcastles for her, nor does she need to build sandcastles through you. She can build her own sandcastles. And she goes on to say, look at the Grand Canyon. Um, God doesn't need credit for your sandcastles, as some people suggest. She does. She gave you the ability so that you could build it to uplift yourself. When you do something good, you deserve the credit for it. God rejoices over your sandcastle. She is not jealous of it. The idea of a jealous deity does not sit with her. And this is part of her speaking of freedom, that you should be free from fear of deity because there's nothing to fear in deity. You should understand that deity loves you, deity wants you to succeed, and deity has no need to be jealous or resentful of anything that you do. Um, and one of the things that she would often say, I don't know if she uses this phrase in the book or not, but that if you want to know the will of deity, you look around you at the world, you look at nature. That's where you will see the voice, the message of deity, what deity has absolutely done. Um, someone's idea of that is just that, and that includes her own, includes my own. We're here to help um, with our understandings, but they too should never bind anyone. You should have your own understanding. You should develop yourself spiritually. And that really is I think, the overriding message of the Five Mystic Secrets. Many people think, even today, that it is the definitive work on Correllian theology. And I certainly am pleased to endorse that view. And once again, this new version of the book, which is available in both paperback for $20 and hardback for $50, has translations of the document in 8 different languages. And this is because we are a global tradition, and um, we wanted to be able to make this available to people in their own language, insofar as we could at this moment. Um, and so, whether you speak English or Spanish or French or any of those other languages that are in this book, if you buy this volume, it's there for you. Um, and um, it, I am hoping, will be of great service to our people in non-English speaking areas. Now, of course, we have people who speak many languages other than these 8 languages. And we're hoping to be able to expand on this in the future at some time. But these were the translations we had to work with now. And, back in, I believe it was 2009, we went to Australia for the Parliament of the World's Religions. And we took with us translations of the Five Mystic Secrets and a flyer called What is Wicca? What is Wicca? We were able to have translated into 20 different languages. And one day I would love to see the Five Mystic Secrets in 20 languages. But right now, 8 is what we can comfortably do, and therefore it's what we've done. And if you would be interested in pre-ordering it, it is available at CorellianPublishing.com. Again, both paperback and hardback are available, and they are available for pre-order as of about 15 minutes ago. Well, 15 minutes before I came on air, so 45 minutes ago. And again, the ETA is around June 1st, because they will have to be printed, of course. But what we normally do at CorellianPublishing.com is we do start with a pre-order that allows us to make that first order. But we do use print on demand, so it doesn't have to be a large pre-order for us to do that. And that really has revolutionized publishing in general, and certainly our publishing. I am hoping to bring you many more wonderful books from CorellianPublishing.com. We have a number of new ones that we are working on. We have a number of translations we're working on, all of which I hope will come, well, hopefully before the end of this year, certainly within the passage of a year. And the translations, some of them are already in process, some are yet to be begun, and that, of course, will depend on how quickly they can be translated. Other books are in process, but the newest is the Five Mystic Secrets Multilingual Edition. And with that, we have had pretty much our half hour. I hope that you enjoyed my discussion of the Five Mystic Secrets. I will be back tomorrow, and I hope that you have a wonderful day, and we will close as we normally do with a prayer. Divine Mother Goddess, Divine Father God, beloved ancestors, we ask that you be with us and walk with us as we go forward, and help us to realize the eternal nature of the universe, and to look upon you with loving and relaxed eyes, to know that we are not in a race, but rather a class, that we are learning going forward, that we are artworks in progress. And if we are not perfect today, that is no judgment against us. It is merely where we are, and we have all the time in the world to finish our journey. Beloved Mother Goddess, beloved Father God, beloved ancestors, we thank you, and may you be blessed now and always. And may you be blessed now and always. And again, I will see you tomorrow. And with that, I will sign off for today.